You know, I'm willing to bet a fair bit of my core audience saw this video and did a double take onto why I'm playing this game, and the reason is, I'm a man of the people, and the people asked for Nikke. More specifically, they asked for it when I was asking for underrated games to play, and I could not, in good conscience, stare you directly in the eyes as I added a game which generates more money than some countries into a list that's meant to be underrated ones. So I decided that since the people asked for it, I would do a video talking about Nikke. In particular, I would talk about one thing that the player base has been saying over and over about the game, that it's misunderstood. Not within the fact that if you play it in a public space, you will be added to a list. People, generally know about how degenerate it is. There's nothing really smoke and mirrors about that, but instead, there is a very great game beyond that. You can judge it as a gooner game, and you wouldn't be wrong to, but there is something beyond that that people can love. So that is what I want to find out, to see if the propaganda I have heard about this game is true or not, and if it's not, then that just means I've played Brown Dust 2 and Nikke back to back, so yeah, that sentence is gonna stick with me. What's the next game people are gonna recommend from our part 2 of underrated gachas idea? Fucking Azure Lane? But the thing I wanted to check out was the story, as that's what I've heard over and over is peak. And to me, it's the most important part because all the gachas I've stuck with for years were ones that made me give a shit about the world and characters. And the ones I dropped were around when I stopped giving a shit about the story. Cause like, I can take horror gameplay if it means I'll have something to be invested in. I mean, goddamn, I've played Drakengard 3 before. And I currently play Limbus Company. So when it came to Nikke, I was wondering just how they'd make me invested. Now, the premise for the plot is pretty basic. Post-apocalyptic world, these things called raptures came onto Earth, went to clap humanity's cheeks, humanity tried to negotiate with them, that didn't fucking work. To fight back, they developed the Nikkes by transplanting human brains into strong chassis. Really sounds quite fucked up when you say it out loud, but they were humanity's only way to win. Then they got their ass beat all the way to Sunday and retreated underground into the Ark, the last bastion of humanity. It's kind of similar in a sense to PGR's apocalyptic setting, though instead of the last bastion being in space, it's underground. So I suppose you could say it's probably a little closer to Gurren Lagann if you think about it, though the Raptures have been on Earth for more than a century, and humanity is trying to take the surface back. Because of that, they send out a commander with a squad of Nikkes to fight the war against them, and that's where the game starts. Or more specifically, it starts with everything having gone to shit. The mission was a search and rescue for lost Nikkes, but one of the transport ships got blown up on the way there. Then you meet up with a squad of Nikkes who lost their leader, so you become the de facto commander. In your squad you got Marian, Rappy, and Honest. After one of the battles, Marian gets injured and the commander, you, goes to wrap a bandage around her wound, which confuses the Nikkes because no one treats them with any amount of respect. You see, yes, they're pretty much humanity's last hope against the Raptures, but the success rate of missions are abysmal. Most combat missions lack the word combat as a descriptor, motherfucker, most of them are suicide missions. Because of this, so much propaganda is done to dehumanize the Nikkes, just treat them as weapons of war, meant to be sent out, used, and discarded. Most commanders don't even go on new missions with Nikkes they've worked with before, because they don't want that bond to be made. The government has an iron grip on making them seen as just weapons because then it's easier to discard them and harder for them to disobey. It's kinda, fortunately, a bit of a common thing done in the actual military. But this is where you, the player, comes in, someone who actually cares about Nikkes. So you progress through the area looking for a squad of Nikkes that went missing, even though the success rate of these missions are so low, until eventually you get intel that the plane which was supposedly shot down was blown up from the inside by bombs that needed a Nikke's authorization to go off, and the only surviving Nikke from that plane was Marian. When Rappy learned about this, she pressed Marian on it to find out she was corrupted on that plane. And corruption is when the Raptures take control of a Nikke's brain. In some cases, this corruption turns them into a heretic that fights humanity on the side of the Raptures, but for the most part, corruption basically means death. Because of this, you need to fight Marian, and after the battle, according to protocol, all Nikkes that have suffered damage to their brains need to be disposed of by their commander.
指揮官、ぐずぐずしている暇はありません。このまま放置すれば、イレギュラーになる可能性が高くなります。指揮官。嬉しかったです。
After seeing this scene, I knew that if this was the level of weight and care put into the story, all the praise I heard was not exaggerated. Most gacha openings are very bland and usually just an exposition dump, but this one didn't spend a lot of time repeating the lore to the player with the same charisma as reading a wiki page. They gave context clues and just enough information about the world so you don't feel lost, then set the tone perfectly with an emotional scene at the end, and didn't take half a day to finish because unlike a lot of gachas, the story isn't really bloated. Like, I read all the way to chapter 14 in the game and it really didn't take me that long to be honest. Well, to read. To play is one thing, but reading is quick. Now, my thoughts on the main story chapters, aside from the prologue, from the ones I've seen, it's been a pretty easy read. There's good doses of comedy, so not everything is depression porn, which I've seen way too many gachas fall into. The overall plot is interesting as well. You're basically carving your own place within the arc and slowly unraveling the secrets behind it. But aside from some key moments, overall the main story plot just felt like good. This is only up to 14, don't know about the later ones, but overall, aside from some key moments, the main plot wasn't mind-blowing, but I also don't think that's the goal. So far, it just felt like a quick and easy read to get you invested in the world. You're not subjected to reading a novel, but you're not reading a bad story either. That's the vibe I got from the main story, sort of like a nice small piece of a bigger cake, which I don't really know if I should use that analogy given the game I'm talking about, but you know what I'm saying. Because what I found out was the main piece of the cake was the side stories, in particular, Overzone. Now, I heard this was one of the best stories the game had to offer. My friends were pushing me to try it out when they saw I was playing the game. They recommended a shit ton of Pilgrim events, but said that if you only had to focus on one, Overzone is where it's at. And I see why. It was fucking goated. Now, when I talk about this, I am gonna spoil it, so if you don't want to be spoiled, bestie, you're gonna have to click off the video, not gonna lie. I sorta ended up writing a lot about it because I really fucking enjoyed it. I think it's the best way to show where the praise for the story comes from. So Overzone begins with the goddess squad defending an outpost for humanity. The goal is to hold off any hordes of raptures trying to break through, as what they're defending is the Ark before it got into Earth, before it's sealed off. The story takes place years before the main plot does. This is humanity essentially at its weakest. They're forced into the Ark as a last retreat, and if it could be sealed off, they'll have a chance to regroup. But if not, humanity will be extinguished. And all that's left of the Goddess Squad is Dorothy, Snow White, Scarlet, and Rapunzel. Their leader, Lilith, died and Red Hood is nowhere to be found. Dorothy took control as squad leader and keeps sending messages to the Ark, the request being that after holding out and making sure not a single rapture gets past the outpost, they'll be taken into the Ark as goddesses of victory for their sacrifices. A bit on the nose for a title considering it's the name of the game, but I mean hey, it makes sense. They're basically humanity's last bastion as there's a grand total of fucking 4 of them. They have some mass-produced Nikkes on their squad, think cannon fodder basically, but the situation is dire and they haven't heard back from command in a while. Then when they are about to have a nice meal, raptures attack them and burn down their food storage. All of it, turned to ash. And the mass-produced Nikkes they had were reduced to just one left, Pine. Though they were able to scrounge up some food, but it barely lasted them any time. After some days had passed, they had no food, were slowly dying, and the Ark hadn't responded, not once. Since given the orders, the Ark hasn't responded to any of their calls. Because of this, the group starts infighting. Scarlet gets drunk to cope, Rapunzel spends all of her time praying for the dead, Snow White is spending all of her time keeping watch for the raptures, and Dorothy doesn't know what to do. Until Pine speaks up and says that the infighting is unbecoming of the Goddess Squad. As to the mass-produced Nikkes, they resemble hope. All of the ones that chose to fight alongside them did so because of what they represent. So seeing them reduced to petty infighting is unbecoming. They're the squad keeping the last bastion of humanity standing, the squad that will return to the Ark as heroes, but in this situation, what can they do? The leader, Dorothy, has 2 of her comrades coping in whatever way they can. The third is staying on lookout for days without eating or sleeping, and the one lifeline they keep asking for help hasn't responded at all. To find some solace or way to fix things, she returns to Lilith's grave, which is where Pine speaks to her and says that she's putting everything on her shoulders. She doesn't trust anyone and has been going about this on her own. So she makes her ask for help, tells her that it's okay to. It's funny, one random mass-produced Nikke is basically the glue that's keeping Dorothy from unraveling. She's the one that's had her back for these last couple of days. Hell, without her, the Goddess Squad would have definitely fallen. But due to her advice, Dorothy asks Snow White for help and she starts going out for provisions because the raptures hadn't attacked in some days. Then she was able to help Rapunzel stop spending all of her time praying for the dead and instead focus on the living. Then she finds out Scarlet was only pretending at being drunk as a way to raise her spirits, and together, they all fix their problems and share the same goal, survival. They presume that the Ark won't be able to send in resources, and so 2 people will stay at the outpost and guard it, whilst the others go out to secure more provisions. The first round up, Pine and Dorothy will stay at the outpost as everyone else gathers supplies. Though after skinning the deer they got, the raptures attacked the base. Dorothy made Pine shoot the rescue flare to inform the members that had left to return, then told her to go into hiding as she fought off the raptures. But after the battle, Dorothy found out that Pine was corrupted.
ドロシーさん、ドロシーさん、ドロシーさん、シーさん、ドロシーさん。ピナ、私の声が聞こえますか？侵食なんかに負けないでください。私がいます。私がゴッテス、勝利の女神、人類の希望。ドロシー様。ピナ、早く手遅れにならない。できません。そんなことでできるはずが。一緒に戦え。楽園、一緒に行けたらよいかな。信号弾、行こう。ドロシー、ご無事ですか？ドロシー。返してください。ドロシー、返してください。ピナを返してください。楽園に一緒に行くと。だから返してください。
Pine was the only reason she made it this far. She lent her hand and kept Dorothy sane as she had the position of leader thrown onto her without being prepared for that burden. When the Ark never responded to her, when her comrades all succumbed to isolation, finding whatever way best to cope with the hopelessness, Pine helped her reach out to them and stay together. Dorothy's one hope that has kept her sane throughout all of this was the promise from the Ark that they will be let into paradise after everything. That's why she could never easily let go when it came to asking for confirmation that they'll be allowed in the Ark. But after Pine saved her, she stopped being a slave to the comms device. She still wanted to go to the Ark, but Pine being there helped lessen her enthrallment to that promise. Because with Pine, maybe she could have her paradise on the surface, but it was all ripped away from her. After ensuring she was safe, Snow White left her alone in her room to grieve. And when everything is lost and Dorothy is at her lowest, she finally gets a response from the Ark. In unusually high spirits, she tells the Goddess Squad about the news and they listen to the message. It gives them 3 tasks to do. 1. Establish comms. 2. Clear out strong raptures in the area. And 3. Destroy the freight elevator to the Ark so the raptures can't take it down before it's ready to be secured. And the Ark assures them that they will be rewarded for what they've had to sacrifice. Before setting out, Snow White asks Scarlet and Rapunzel to keep an eye out for Dorothy because of what she went through and the fact that she's unusually upbeat. But they get supplies from command and easily enough finish the first 2 tasks. And before setting out for the third, Snow White asks Dorothy a question.
どうして私たちをじっと見つめて。ドロシー、なぜ私たちと言うんだ？ん？そこにはあなた一人しかいない。一体何を見ているんだ？スノーホワイト？何を言っているのかわかりません。ピナが今もあなたの隣にいるのか？はい、さっきからずっといますよ。今までずっと一緒だったじゃありませんか。
To cope with the loss of Pine, she's deluded herself into believing that she's still alive, that she's still with her. But regardless of what Snow White can say, even the plain truth of what happened, she doesn't believe that Pine is dead. So everyone decides that if this is Dorothy's way of coping, they'll let her keep going that way. At least to help keep her together for the last days before they can return to the Ark. So they destroy the freight elevator and wait at the outpost for 3 weeks until the mission is over and they are able to enter the Ark. Command provides them with food and everything is going steady. Then the day arrives where the Ark is finally sealed and Dorothy asks where they should go to enter.
皆さんの功績を称え、アークには巨大な勝利の女神像が建てられるでしょう。そして、皆さんを神格化した書籍や広告を作り、アーク内で積極的に展開していく予定です。みんながゴッテス部隊を崇めるでしょう。
あなた、お名前は？
オスワルドです。
そうですか。オスワルド、一つ約束して差し上げましょう。あなたを。それが無理なら、あなたの家族、子孫をこの世で最も苦しい方法で殺してあげます。今すぐドアを開けなければ入り口を壊しますよ。そうすればあなたたちはおしまいです。
できません。あなたには。
いいえ、できます。だから開けてください。
あなたたちは高貴な存在です。そういう方たちなのです。皆さんは通信を切ります。
Humanity threw them away, treating their story and sacrifice as future propaganda to make Nikke's out to be nothing more than self-sacrificing weapons that will give everything to save humanity. The story they've spun is that the Gacha Squad chose to stay on the surface, not that humanity closed its doors on them and let them die or get corrupted on the surface against the Raptures. And after some time, the squad decides to leave the outpost to not attract more Raptures to it and eventually find the Ark. Dorothy, outraged at the idea of protecting their betrayers, lashes out at the group, which makes Snow White try to help her.
私も悔しい。腹が立つ。しかし、私たちはゴッテスだ。勝利の女神、人類の希望、ゴッテスなんだ。私たちは最後までゴッテスでいなければ、その誇りを胸に植え付けてくれたのは、いや、絶対に消えないよう奮い立たせてくれたのは、ドロシー、あなただ。あなたが教えてくれたんだ。答えろ、ドロシー。私たちは勝利の女神か。答えろ。私たちは勝利の女神か。はい。私たちは人類の希望か。はい。私たちはゴッテスか。
ドロシー。そうです。はい。その通りです。私たちは勝利の女神、人類の希望、ゴッテスです。
Her words reminded Dorothy of what she said as the new leader of the Gacha Squad, but most importantly, it helped remind her of what Pine viewed them as, hope. So even though they were betrayed, even though she has every right to strike back at humanity, what they represent is why their sacrifices weren't worthless. What they did is why it's not worthless. If all of humanity is going to betray them, at least they have each other as support. At least she still has Pine as support. Renewed, the group goes their separate ways, with the goal of killing the Queen of the Raptures. They plan to search where they can on their own, and after a month, meet up to talk about what they found. Everyone goes their own way, but Dorothy returns to the outpost because it seems like Pine didn't follow them out. Going back to it, the delusion of Pine convinces her to stay there with her. It's their paradise. They spend some time there, enjoying each other's company and finding some happiness in life. And at Lilith's grave, Dorothy says she doesn't miss her, because in her life she accomplished all she set out to do, and only after did she depart. So she has no regrets about her passing, nor does she miss her.
この棺は皆さんの手作りですか？
はい。グレンが滑らかな石を切ったのです。ピナの棺も作ってほしいと言おうと思ったのに。あれ？風の声、光の粒、窓の君に注ぐ。そうだったのね。ありがとう、ピナ。私がくじけないようにずっとそばにいてくれたのですね。ありがとうございます。絶対に忘れません。さようなら。
Only until the delusion of Pine was able to make sure Dorothy was fine did she leave. It was a manifestation of how Pine was to Dorothy, which is why she only left when Dorothy was at a point where she could seemingly deal with her passing. Because it's what Pine would have done. Because Pine would have made sure Dorothy was at that point before she ever left her. But she might not have been. Because for the next 13 days, Dorothy was mentally unable to leave the paradise she lived with Pine in, until the memory of her drives her to go forward. But she's lost. She has no purpose in her life anymore. She wanted to find paradise for herself, but humanity ripped it away from her, and Pine's passing destroyed her second chance at it. She has nothing. Until she stops at a sign saying humanity's last paradise. The Ark welcomes you. Years later, she's never met with the other pilgrims of the Gacha Squad until Snow White finds her and asks why she's looking for any information she can of the Ark to strike back at it. It's because she wants them begging for forgiveness because of what they stole from her. Snow White tries to talk her out of it, but the words she used in the past to help her cope didn't matter. It only helped because Pine was there to hold her together, but years later, with the delusion of Pine gone and nothing to spend her life working towards, she's changed and has no plans of stopping. Now, when it comes to why I really love this story, not gonna lie, a big part of it is it kind of reminds me of Angela's plotline from LobCorp. Like, I mean, hey, fucking sue me, right? But like, it's kind of there. Like, you can't say I'm fully wrong, you know? But jokes aside, I do like the story as, yeah, of course the writing is top notch. It helps dispel the idea that's constantly thrown around that Nikkes are just unfeeling weapons. The main story does that too with seeing your squad display emotions, but this one takes it a step further when you see that betrayal completely change them. If the game throws around the idea that these are weapons of war that, even though they have human emotions, they are still loyal to humanity, seeing one of them crack and go against, essentially how they are hardwired, is a great way to show the propaganda being a lie. Then, of course, regardless of whatever Dorothy can do, the story still reminds the player that in the Ark, all these years later, the Gacha Squad is still being lied about and Nikkes are still treated like shit. It shows how the world is rather than just going like, Nikkes are hated, but you the player are different, yippee, that I've seen stories like this fall into. And this story helps show another reason why the player base says Nikke is misunderstood, because Nikke is, yeah, undeniably a Gooner game, but the thing is, when it comes to games in that genre, a lot of people think that the characters in it aren't treated as characters, but instead just a walking, talking, I love you machine. That's the public perception, and for good reason, because on a lot of games like that, that's all the characters really are. They just exist to love the self-insert. They don't have character beyond that. And in cases where they don't love the self-insert or are not like devoted to them, people have gotten genuinely mad as fuck. There's been enough cases to where I was able to make a video about it and stuff related to it. Why the fuck is that video still my most watched one? But I wouldn't be surprised if people hear Nikke has a great story and just think the peak story is a AAA version of a self-insert fanfic you can read on AO3. But Overzone shows that the story is confident to write characters devoid of how they are in respects to the player character, because the events of it don't include them. And it's not afraid to show the characters in the story actually having fangs and hate towards humanity, instead of just watering them down to, ooh, cute waifu who loves you. It has characters with actual character that are well written, which sounds fucking stupid when I phrase it like that, but I think what I'm saying makes sense. So from what I've seen of the story, it does go against what a lot of people would think it's like due to the game. Now, that's the important point I wanted to see when it came to if Nikke was misunderstood, the story. So talking about gameplay and stuff doesn't really matter for that point, but I got some shit to talk after playing the game for a while. Now, the gameplay isn't bad by any means. It's basically a shooting gallery where you pop out your burst skills, do the different ultimates like damage buffs, whatever, but that's pretty much it. So when you got your team now down and what bursts you want to pop mapped out, there ain't really much else for the gameplay aside from just aiming at the enemy and the circles you gotta pop now and then against bosses, which like, it isn't watered down like an auto battler, but it ain't as insane as Arknights or Wuwa or Gachas that can have their gameplay as the main selling point. It's not a negative, but it's not an overwhelming positive. Like overall, I'm just kind of neutral when it comes to how I feel about the gameplay. The part I dislike is the grind. To keep this as quick as possible, because this video is already fairly long, the main story stages require you to have very high power levels for your units to clear them, and the problem is, clearing these stages underleveled is hard as hell because the game puts an arbitrary penalty on you if your power level is below recommended. So if you are at a 5% deficit, you deal 25% less damage and take 25% more damage. If you are at a 25% deficit, that goes up to 52%. My brother in Christ. why? The story is the best part of the game, but the main story, something people need to be invested in due to that being the thing that'll get constant updates and be built upon throughout the years, is some of the hardest content in the game. Thankfully, clearing events is easy, so there's no worries there at all, but you have to grind your balls off to be able to clear the main story. Thankfully, the game gives you level 200 units to use for free. You can use each of them 3 times a day, but this is a little band-aid to a bigger worry, the 160 wall. You see, SSR Nikkes have their level cap at 160, but if you get 3 dupes of them, then you can increase the level cap of that Nikke to 200. You then need to get 5 Nikkes to level 200 to unlock something called Advanced Synchro, a system where you put resources into it to level it, and every level gives a level to all the Nikkes you have. So when you get walled in the story, the way you got to level up is to gacha for dupes, hit that 200 wall, then grind your ass off again for resources to level it. But it requires 10,000 core dust for 1 level. To put it into perspective, a passive generator of resources is the outpost. At higher levels you generate more resources, but to level it you need to clear story stages. At my current level, I get 50 core dust an hour. I need 10,000 for 1 level. There's other ways to get core dust, it's not just the outpost, but that puts into perspective just how much grind is needed. And all of this is to clear the main story, to get to the best part of the game. Why? Like, I'm not against the grind in a sense, because I do like seeing the way my team gets stronger bit by bit, but when it walls to new players the part of the game that everyone loves, it just seems like a baffling decision. Like, it's gonna take you months to catch up to the main story, and if you play the game on and off, the main story's power level is gonna leave you in the dust. And with more chapters being added, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets to the point where it's gonna take a year or more for new players to catch up to the main story. I don't know why this is a thing. It makes players go like, Nikke's story is great, watch it on YouTube. Like, what? Why not just do what Arknights and Reverse 1999 do and just make an easy mode for the main story? If you don't want that to be a cheap way to level your outpost, just make clearing those stages not give you outpost level. It honestly makes no sense to me. Though, rant about the grind aside, to the point of the video, yeah, I see why people say Nikke is misunderstood. They don't mean it in a way of saying it's not a Gooner game. It is. Everyone knows that fact. It's like saying the fucking sky is blue. But they mean to say that unlike a lot of other games similar to it, it actually gives a fuck. It has an interesting world, good characters, and a good story. It doesn't treat its characters as a means to fawn over the self-insert, and the self-insert actually acts like a decent fucking person within the story. It's a breath of fresh air, to be honest. Now, if you don't like hypersexualized games, yeah, getting into it's gonna be hard. For me, I don't give a fuck in general, but even then, in the story, I'm focused on reading, and in the gameplay, I'm focused on shooting. The character designs don't even register for me half the time, not gonna lie. But overall, I can say that the story and characters are really good. I'd say that if it can keep the highs of Overzone, it's up there with some of the better stories I've read in gachas. And from what I've heard of some spoilers, it looks like it can keep that pace. But playing it is a hard recommendation because the grind can definitely be a turn away for a lot of people, and then there's worries that the game is currently just spamming out banners and collabs over and over, so saving is getting hard. Honestly, the playing part of the game is looking like a big thing that stops a lot of players. To where I do see why I've heard Nikke players say, great game, watch the story on YouTube. And I gotta say, if you can't stomach the grind, that's pretty solid advice.